Thank you, Premier. So, out of all of the 49 additional cases today, only 4 have been currently linked to outbreaks. All the others are a result of routine testing or are under investigation. But for many of those, they'll be later linked to outbreaks, and we'll have updates tomorrow that will reflect that. But for the 4 that are known to be associated with outbreaks, one is an additional case in the North Melbourne family outbreak. That brings the total in this outbreak to 21. There's an additional case in the Stanford Plaza outbreak. And as you know, this is a quarantine hotel, but it hasn't led to community transmission. There's been an outbreak associated with it that relates to the staff and their close contacts at home. So it's not a case of transmission from this hotel that's gotten out into the community and has led to broader transmission, just for clarification around that. There's the Coles Keilor Downs family outbreak, so there's an additional staff member now bringing the Coles portion of that outbreak to 4. We'll need to review that in detail today. It's a big facility. It has a lot of staff. Hundreds of those have been tested, but we need to do a risk review just to make sure that we're crossing off all of the required actions to make sure that there aren't additional cases coming out of that outbreak. And there's one new case linked to the Brimbank family outbreak, a close contact of a known case. So already quarantining doesn't present a risk to others, but that brings that outbreak number to 6.
Jenny, testing?
Yeah, certainly numbers today are big, and they've increased day on day. But you really need to wait 5 or 6 days to see in the numbers the effects of whatever interventions you've made. That's the kind of average incubation period for people. So the restrictions in terms of group gatherings and visitors to homes were only made about that length of time ago. And so I would hope that we're getting to a phase now where numbers are plateauing and hopefully driven down. But if it continues to increase, I think those are the circumstances where you think about an additional intervention, and especially if it's localised in a particular postcode or a particular suburb, where there are significant increase in cases where you can't link them to outbreaks, where you can't see where the relationship in all of those cases are. At the moment, as new test results come through, a lot of those, and this will be the case for today, a lot of those get linked back to known clusters and known outbreaks. And we know that people are stepping up for testing. That's a really good sign. But I want to remind everyone that there are 2 essential tools here. One's the test and trace mechanism. The other one is what people do in terms of managing their own illness. So staying at home, getting tested is an absolutely critical one, but minimising the number of people you see, never going to work if you're unwell, never seeing others if you're unwell, they're the other absolutely essential elements, because if we just go down a test and trace pathway, we won't get on top of this. If people continue to visit others, if people continue to turn up to work and transmit to others, because those result in outbreaks and they become very tricky to turn around.
Do you think at one of these hotspots to sort of monitor traffic going in and out be a consideration if you do need to take things further?
I think we'd have to talk through all of the operational details if we ever get to that point. I would, strongly encourage it as a kind of last resort. I think you can get strange behaviours if you go down a particular pathway where people move to other suburbs or people, change their behaviour in ways that might increase risk. So I think we have to think through all of that. I would say that the very best approach is to ramp up all of the things that we're doing now. This is really, as the Premier said, a textbook approach in terms of how you respond to outbreaks, and I think if we can get people's cooperation and that behaviour change sustained over the next couple of weeks, then we'll see numbers go down.
But do you think this outbreak is as effective as the nasal swab, and there will the saliva test be offered to everyone or just?
Certainly the saliva test has been validated as a very useful test with very good accuracy. How it measures up against the PCR nasal and throat swab test yet to be seen in this context, but it has a place. It won't be rolled out for absolutely everyone. Certainly not at this stage, but I think it's that useful addition, both in terms of not needing the personal protective equipment because people don't need to receive the test with mask and gown on, and the collection's much easier, and it's obviously not uncomfortable to provide that sample.
Do you think
Drill
that
down
test-
into the causes of some of these family outbreaks and be a bit more frank about, I mean, people have talked about, say, some of the cultural factors involved. So with, say, the Keilor Downs family outbreak, I mean, do we know now how it's done and why it's spread to the extent it has, and what are the sort of the cultural factors involved? It's hard to
Yeah, look, I won't speak to a specific family, and really these are the same drivers where we see other outbreaks that are complex and run across different locations. The same things occur, that people with very mild symptoms don't stop, get tested, wait for a result before they see others. And so they cross households or they cross settings, including work settings, because people sometimes go to work with very mild symptoms or symptoms that they ascribe to something else, the chronic cough, the smoker's cough, whatever it might be, and they don't say, oh, gee, I wonder if this could be coronavirus, I wonder if I shouldn't be staying at home. So the same things drive all of our outbreaks in that regard. Sometimes people are genuinely not symptomatic, they're about to become symptomatic, and they're still infectious. So, you know, there are people who've essentially not done anything wrong and haven't been symptomatic, but are still transmitting to others. And that's why there's another message there, which is minimise your interactions with other people to the fullest extent that you can. Don't see lots of friends, don't see lots of family members if you can help it. Do your food shopping online, do your retail shopping online in order to minimise that risk where you might just be a day or two from developing symptoms but you're still infectious.
But what you've described there, I mean, that suggests that we should have dozens of these type of outbreaks. I mean, that's a very common kind of explanation for things, but it's very localised, right? So there seems to be something particular going on in these areas that explains why there's these outbreaks.
Well, I think there are certain families that are much larger. There are families that have broader care obligations to extended family members. There are families where the social norms are such that they would see others more frequently. That's what we need to turn around, but that's not just a message for a particular family, that's a message for everyone.
Is there a message for a particular ethnic group? Is there a cultural explanation for this?
Well, I think there are certainly new migrant families that are larger, they have more kids, they have more crowded households. But there should be no vilification in this space. This is a virus that will simply transmit to others if they're close enough.
I'm not after vilification.
No, I understand.
Is there an explanation for why this happens?
Yeah, look, I think there are different households where people's interactions and the size of those households and how crowded they might be is a factor in transmission, and it's not about people's failure necessarily to do the right thing, but it is a higher risk of transmission in certain settings.
Can I add to that on the issue that you've raised? I would just.
29 cases today. Do we have a figure on how many of those were through community transmission?
No, not yet. They really do come in quite late in the afternoon, evening, and people are already going to bed, so we're not going to pick up the phone and interview them, through the night. But all of that will be done today, and that attribution will be made tomorrow, as it was for yesterday's numbers. Again, with yesterday's numbers of 41, the great majority of those ended up being linked to known outbreaks and clusters. So I imagine it will be the same for today, but we don't get that information from those notified late last night.
And is it a concern you've got a couple of cases that could be linked to high traffic areas of the district station?
I think you'll see high traffic areas reflected in people's history because, high traffic areas get a lot of people going through there. It doesn't mean that they picked it up there, but it is a concern about whether they might have transmitted to others if they've been infectious at that time. So that's another reminder that anyone, with symptoms, no matter how mild, needs to keep their distance from others.
Just on a happier note, hospital admissions aren't rising, or at least not directly. Do you know why?
I think in the same way that we've seen the US cases take off like nothing else, but deaths have continued to fall, there has been a transition to a younger population. They get more mild disease, and so if you haven't got such a vulnerable population affected, and I think we've seen a greater proportion of our recent cases in the 20 to 40 year age group, we're not going to see those people requiring hospital. But the danger still is there, because through all of those cases, they've got potential contacts with people who are more vulnerable, who'll end up in hospital. And if we continue to have cases at 40, 50 a day, unfortunately, we will see deaths associated with it, because it represents a lot of transmission, and there'll be a lot of vulnerable people who are potentially exposed.
And are those vulnerable people mostly still self-isolating nursing homes, those types of things?
Yeah, I think people who are in the most at-risk group are absolutely being very precautionary, and it's hard to get in there with a message to people who suffer more mild illness. But I would say to anyone who's young, from teenager to 20s or 30s, you don't just think about your family, think about what this might mean in terms of transmission through your entire community, and what the consequences might be for those who are most at risk, because we've seen that it's very hard to protect those most at risk if you've got out of control transmission, even when you've got a strategy to try and protect those, shield those most at risk individuals as much as possible. If you've got really significant transmission, it becomes an enormous task to protect everyone. Thank you.
Everyone right? All good? Thanks very much.